Are we on? Hello, Callum. I think we're on, mate. Hopefully, the Wi-Fi doesn't let us down. But welcome to the Wheel Talk Live podcast, Callum. You're an absolute legend, and it's a pleasure to have you on. I figured we have plenty of good, insightful, and philosophical conversations on WhatsApp, and you're a very interesting guy. So I thought I'd get you on the Wheel Talk Live podcast. How you doing, pal? Thanks for joining.
It's an honor, Joe, and thanks for having me. Firstly, and I've known you for a number of years now, and I just think you're such a credit to the football club and the community we've got, and I'm honored to be on your podcast today. So thank you, mate.
Nice one, pal. Big respect, and that's a great place to start, really, in where we obviously know each other and our mutual love of Burnley Football Club and where that particularly started for you. But I know you wanted to shout somebody out at the start, that you just to say hello to the man, the myth, the legend.
Well, I was talking this afternoon by text to a mutual friend of ours, and in his usual kind of perverse, joking way, he said to me, "If you don't mention me on this podcast, then I'm not talking to you anymore." So I have to say that, Tom McDonough is a good friend of mine. He's a friend of yours as well. You're a legend, and I know he's going to listen because he said he was going to listen when this goes out. So he did tell me I had to mention him. So there you go.
I might get him on, but then again, I think he'd get me cancelled within the first 30 seconds of him speaking,
You know
wouldn't
what?
it?
I think he'd be quite good, by the way. I think he'd be quite good in a setting like this. But you do what you decide to do, and some of us are up for taking risks in life. Do you know what I mean? So go for it.
Yeah, so 100%, and it's like I said, these connections that transcend far more than sport itself. Can you talk about where your love of Burnley first began, though? Because it's quite unique in that you don't necessarily have the strongest of northern accents, should we say?
I mean, look, I grew up in North London, as you know,
Yeah.
and where I grew up, most kids where I grew up were either Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool, um, Tottenham, Chelsea. But my dad was a Burnley fan, and from a very young age, I remember being. I wouldn't say I was sort of thrown into it because the truth is that I went to my first game when I was 3 or 4, and we played against Stockport away, and it was a very interesting game because the I fell asleep at half time, and I think we lost 2-1 from what I know, from what I've been told. But I was 3 or 4, and the truth is that for the majority of my youth, the majority of my childhood, we were a pretty poor team. Like we were in the
Yeah.
third or fourth division for most of it. And I remember being in primary school at the age of 6 or 7. I remember this vividly. And we had an international day at primary school. It was a Saturday afternoon. And that day, England were playing Italy in a World Cup qualifier. I think it was 1998. It must have been in 1997, ahead of the 1998 World Cup. And the game was in Italy, and I think it was 0-0, but England qualified because they drew or something. But I just remember being in the school playground, and somebody turned to me and said, "Have you seen the Burnley result?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Burnley lost 5-0 at Carlisle today." Right. And all these other kids around me were laughing their heads off, going, "Ha ha, ha, Burnley rubbish, Burnley rubbish, Burnley terrible." And many of them supported Arsenal or Man United or someone. And so during the pandemic, just to fast forward a bit, we played Arsenal away during the pandemic, and no one was allowed in the stadium. But I had this feeling that morning we were going to win, and I've never seen us win at the Emirates. And a lot of my mates where I grew up are Arsenal. So I begged and borrowed and stole. And I got this football journalist from North London who I know quite well, who's an avid Arsenal fan. And he probably won't like the fact that I'm admitting this now publicly, but I got him to give me his pass to the Emirates. So I got in to watch us win at the Emirates, and I'm the only Burnley fan, right? And the point is that it wasn't easy growing up in North London, a Burnley fan, when we were kids, but nowadays it's probably actually not nowhere near as hard because in truth, we're a far more respected and kind of admired club by many people because for many years under the legend that is Sean Dyche, we obviously competed in the Premier League for, a season after season. And we've got a lot of people here now would see us a bit differently. So, yeah, I grew up a Burnley fan, and I'm very proud of it now. I mean, there were days when I was very young where I probably thought, God, I kind of got brought into this. But in truth, I'm extremely proud of being a Burnley fan. I'm extremely proud of the community that I've built through being a fan of the club and of the town, by the way, and the local area, not just the town.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love the place.
Do you not think there's something far more appealing of sort of being a fan of a club that's experiencing those years in the doldrums though? For me, like I know obviously I've had it easy in terms of I'm 24 and I've virtually seen only good times at Burnley Football Club, but I obviously I want us to be in the Premier League because of the financial the rewards and the overall health of the football club that it brings. But I find it really boring. There isn't any sort of emotion that's the same. Do you get what I'm trying to say? I bet you got your real grounding as a football fan back in the day in terms of
Oh
the
yeah,
highs.
100%. 100%. I've been to 79 league grounds now following Burnley. I've been all over the country. Like when I was young, I was very lucky. My dad used to take me everywhere. So we
Yeah,
used to go to like, random places, Rochdale, Rotherham, like Swindon on a Tuesday night. I've been loads of places that many people in your generation following the club would never think you'd ever end up going to because we've only
yeah,
been in the Premier League or the Championship. But the truth is, I think actually that the romance of football and football fanaticism and support, for me, it's not really, you said it before we went on air, but it's not really about results. It's about the fanaticism of,
mm,
staying loyal to something, staying loyal to a cause, building a family, building a kind of network of people. And now, a lot of my friends at football, they're not just my friends at football anymore. They're very close friends of mine in life, and that
yeah,
that, that has all stemmed from football. And you meet people from all walks of life, and that's part of the sort of the magic that comes with it. In my experience, is you
yeah.
meet people from all walks of life. You learn lots of things that if I wasn't going to football regularly, I wouldn't know about. And um, that's all part of the magic, really, in following our club across the country. And look, I wouldn't regret any of it.
100%. And what you were saying earlier about the town as well, you can learn so much from being in social settings before the match. The various pubs, seeing the various old cotton mills, the old people telling stories of the 60s and while smoking a cigarette, and people don't not might not always know this about me, but I'm always watching and listening and picking up little bits of information or social cues, whether somebody's a wrong, whether somebody's a good bad. I can usually sort of pick that up within 30 seconds because I'm always watching. Is that something you can sort of empathise with in terms of the town of Burnley? And what do you think most endears people to our town of Burnley / Paddy, where I'm from?
Well, shout out to Paddyham as well. But I mean, look, I know far more about Burnley as an outsider than I do as an insider. But at the same time, the older I get, the more I feel like an insider. And the reason for that is that actually, look, I've been coming to Burnley for over 30 years. And
Yeah,
uh, what I would say about Burnley that I think is special is one, there is an incredible pride in the local area about the community and the area. And there is also a real togetherness and a friendliness to the place. I mean, obviously,
yeah,
over the years, Burnley has had a reputation for some things where it's had negative connotations with it as a town. But
yeah,
I actually have found over the many years I've been around the town that, the place is very friendly. If you respect the place, if you respect the people, if you respect the community, it's a very friendly town. And most people are very welcoming and warm. I think that ultimately the magic in Burnley, if you think about it logically, go and ask the dozens and dozens of former players who still live in the area while they still live there, right? Now, this includes players who were international footballers who played for England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, many and other countries as well, who over the course of many years they came to Burnley to play and they ended up staying, right? Now, there's a reason for that. And it's not just that Burnley has great countryside. It's obviously that Burnley has a great spirit about it, it has a real community about it, has a real an ethos about it. And, I'll be honest, I've spent periods in my life where I thought about moving up there. I've had periods where I thought I might move up there. I think there's a magic to it. And it's one of those places in life, I think that you only know the magic when you're really on the inside and you kind of feel it. It's a feeling. It's not a you can't just arrive in the town and go, wow, this place is special, because there are many towns that physically probably look not too dissimilar to Burnley, especially in the northwest of England. But I think there's a magic to Burnley and there's a romance to it that goes beyond the physical makeup. There's a spirit in the place that I think, once you get to know it, most people, if not all people, would admire it. If they don't warm to it, they'd admire it.
Yeah, I totally agree because throughout the generations of the teams that we've had, I was thinking about this the other day. We always seem to have two or three cult heroes from every single side. You know, uh, Sam Vokes, people like that, Ben Mee from my sort of era, Dean Marner, etc., etc. But it stretches far back. David Ayres, George Agani, etc., etc. And I think people are just like gripped by the place, aren't they? And its rawness and its honesty. And I think it's vital that we sort of keep that element of it whilst, modernising the way the football club is. Because I absolutely love the direction that we're going in at the moment in terms of modernising our ways. Injury that could be lost, and I think it's vital that this sort of hard work in the graft doesn't not. I can't explain what I mean. It's not necessarily that nobody works hard. They do, but it's vital that we don't lose the identity, so to speak, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, and look, the club itself will always be at the heart of the community. And I have some question marks about the
Yeah.
current ownership and how much they value that. But at the same time, from what they've done so far at the club, you can't question the fact that they've probably actually made a lot of people very proud of the club, and that also,
Yeah.
that also extends to the town, especially last season. I mean, this season's probably less going down
100%.
that direction at the moment, but I think in the end, look, Burnley's a really special place. It has a special place in my heart, and the one thing I would also say about Burnley that's quite interesting is because I grew up in North London. North London's a very liberal kind of, it's kind of sort of it's where you'd kind of get the kind of traditional intellectual class of the Labour Party would come from North London traditionally, right? And I think that what Burnley has always taught me over many years of following the club and meeting hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people who I now would identify with many of them as my friends. I think what Burnley's always taught me is a lot about how people in smaller towns and communities that might feel like their voices are not heard as much, how a lot of these people feel. And if I didn't have a place like Burnley where I could go to quite regularly and have these great human connections with so many people from across the town and across the local area, I wouldn't have that much of an education around that stuff that I do have, because most people in North London don't have that. Most people in North London, if I'm honest, they kind of look at these things and don't really understand why people in these places think the way they do. I think I've got more of an education around why people think the way they do in these places than most people from where I'm from, because of my experiences in towns like Burnley, if that makes sense, and other towns
Yeah, totally.
in the UK.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, and I totally agree. Like, I sort of identify with that, not in a bad way, just like in a banter with my friends and stuff. They think I'm like, into people, or I'm fascinated by graffiti, by why people do what they do, or why people behave the way they behave. I love people watching and just picking up little bits of stuff, and that's certainly what you do, not just in Burnley, but also as a fan of Marseille. Nice transition there. Do you want to talk about why you support Marseille and the things that it's done for you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, my first love with Marseille began in 1993. Um, I've been going to the south of France every summer. I was going to France every summer, the south of France every summer when I was a child. My parents loved the area and they used to take us there as kids all the time. And then in 1993, I was 4 years of age, 3 or 4 years of age, and OM, as we call the club, we don't really call it Marseille, we call it OM, which stands for Olympic.
Sorry.
Um, we won the Champions League in 1993. Basil Boli scored a header against AC Milan in the final on the 26th of May 1993. And I'll never forget that summer. It was magical. I was a 4-year-old kid that summer in France, just after they won the European Cup. But it was a magical summer where if you were in that area, you would understand the kind of passion that came out from people that OM had become the first team in France to win the European Cup. And my love affair with OM really began in 1993, but it's kind of increased more and more as I've got older. And I think what's happened in recent years is, I used to watch the odd game. I used to watch, the odd game where I could. I'd follow every result all the way through my childhood and teenage years and my early adulthood. But I think in my early 20s, I stopped drinking. And then I think my love affair of OM really grew a lot from there because um, when I stopped drinking, I kind of got into this situation where I became quite bored of English football, if I'm honest. I think English football has got a kind of, I don't really feel like the modern era of English football is my sort of thing anymore in the way that it used
No.
to be. Like it's not. It's become quite saturated, commercial. It's all about money, and I think the passion has gradually been sort of, transported out of it. And if you ever go to the Velodrome, and if in Marseille we have 8 ultras groups, there's 4 on each stand, and there's a lot of politics in it all. There's a lot of sort of divide between different groups, etc. But you basically end up every week, especially every home game, but nearly every away game as well. You end up with an incredible passion and support for the team and love of the club, but also what we aim to do and what our groups aim to do is we aim to embody the passion and the culture of our city and our traditions of where the city stems from. And we aim to create an atmosphere in every environment that we end up in. And I don't think anyone would doubt that, of all the football clubs in Europe, I think OM would be up there in terms of passion and the way that people think about it as a club that embodies the kind of feisty support that you might expect from clubs of that nature. And I think the older I get, the more I am really an OM fan. I mean, I basically now I watch every game. I'd never miss a game. And ultimately, I think that while the commercialization of English football has been a great success in terms of the money side of it, I think that the passion side of it has reduced substantially in my experience, in my view.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say that there's one Premier League ground, by the way, where the atmosphere is as good as the 10th best atmosphere in France. That's my honest
Interesting.
opinion. So
Wow.
I think that, the passionate side of it, the kind of, the real kind of like the support side of it, I would say now that especially in terms of home support, away support's a bit different. In England, the away supports are pretty good, especially the numbers that travel everywhere. Um, in terms of home support, I think that I think that the kind of the situation now is it's levels apart. I mean, in Marseille now, what you would see on average at the Velodrome in terms of atmosphere is 10 levels above anything you'd see here.
Do you think that's because the authorities are more trusting of the European football fan and give them the freedom of expression? Now, I'm not talking about anything severe because I don't agree with anything severe or anything. I'm talking about things like, flares in the control area or drums or, things like the Poznan, what Man City do, just a general, you know, togetherness feel. Like you say in England, you don't really sort of get that in the top divisions, and you only really sort of get it in like your League Ones, your League Twos. Your normally, to be honest, the best sort of atmosphere I was ever impressed with in terms of Britain is Aberdeen. I went to Aberdeen away in 2018, and I thought that was a real sort of throwback with the flags of the former players and everything like that. And I do agree, some of it's lacking in this country. Do you think it's because in Europe, football fans have more trust and freedom to,
No, I don't actually. I think that they have more power. But I think
fair
that
enough.
actually, I mean, to be honest, OM, for example, our away fans probably get banned for 4 or 5 away games a year. where we're not allowed to
Wow,
attend the away matches, right? So
that's not
we're
good.
not we're not allowed to go to PSG every season. We haven't been allowed to go to PSG for the last 11 years in a row. Most years
Wow.
we're banned from going to Lyon. Most years we'll be banned from going to places like Saint Etienne if they're in the top league. They're not at the
Mm,
moment. Now, I think that actually what the difference is that in England, in England, what you had in the 80s and 90s and even back to the 70s is you did have organized groups of fans that were mainly interested in violence and you would call them, I guess you would call them firms. In mainland Europe, this culture permeated itself in a mixture of what you would call firms, but also what you would call organized ultras groups. And what those groups actually ended up doing in places like Marseille and Napoli and Genoa and all over Italy and France, especially, but also Spain and Germany and Holland to an extent, they ended up with quite powerful positions within their cities and within their clubs. So, for example, at the moment at the Velodrome, in the group that I mainly go with, the winners, we sell the tickets behind the goal, not the club. So it's our stand, right?
mm,
So the club can't tell us what to do because effectively there are relationships and they do liaise with us, and if they have to ban us for something, they will. But ultimately, they're not. We have a lot of control, we have a lot of influence, and if we don't like things that are happening within the club will definitely want to listen to what we have to say. And I think in England that's gone. I think in England the clubs are now way too commercial, but secondly, the fan groups are not organized enough to have the same level of influence that they would have in Marseille or in similar clubs in Europe. And the truth is that there are other there are other fellas at Burnley, for example. There are fellas at Burnley, for example, who've got friendships with Atalanta in Italy, and they would say the same about Atalanta. They would say that you know the club at Atalanta, the fan groups have a lot of influence, and they attend board meetings. They contribute to a lot of things within the club internally. They have a much bigger voice, and I actually think, to be honest, that it's a much better model for football because in the end, managers come and go, owners come and go, players come and go, board members come and go. The only thing that will remain at football clubs is their fans. And the fact that in most of these clubs in England, they don't really have a voice over anything, to be honest. I think that's very sad, and even at Burnley, I don't think the fans have enough of a voice, if I'm honest. Um, Look, at Marseille, just to finish, if we want a manager out of the club and all the fan groups align that we want that manager out, the manager's going. Like, it doesn't matter if the president likes him, he's gone, right? So
interesting.
it's a completely different model.
Why do you think sport has that such power to sort of transcend into society and social causes and sort of have that much of an impact? This sort of segues into my next question about disability, because obviously I know you're passionate about that and sport as well, and supporting people like myself, which is greatly appreciated. But why do you think we all have such passion as a sports fan? Because I know it's not just football, is it? With me and you, it's boxing, it's darts, it's Paralympic. I don't like cricket, if I'm honest, or golf. I find them very, very boring. But it's the sports with energy and about people at the very heart of it for me. And I know that's the same with you.
Yeah, I think sport is a very powerful tool for bringing people together. I think it's also a very powerful tool for improving someone's self-esteem in terms of participation, their belonging, their self-confidence, their skills. But I also think that ultimately, in terms of sports like football, the main word that I'd be looking for is belonging. I think that in the end, everyone in life wants to belong to things, and many people feel at home in their families. Many people feel at home in they get married and they have their own family and they kind of like that's where they belong. And then there are other people who I think search for other things to belong to outside of that kind of familial home environment. And in truth, I think football is an amazing environment for people to feel like they can belong to. And and obviously there are different extremes to which people take that sense of belonging. So some people can just have a season ticket at a football club, buy a match day program every week, watch the team and go home. Other people meet in the pub at 10 a.m., go to the game, go back to the pub after the game, end up spending 3 days with their mates from football in a row. It's like there's completely different extremes to which people kind of enjoy the sport. But I do think in the end, the big power of football in the end is its sense of belonging and what it gives to people. And I'd say also around the world, not just in the UK, but around the world, football is a great escape mechanism for people from their lives. So when it comes to, especially away trips, a lot of people who go on regular away trips around the world, not just in England. A lot of it is about kind of, having days out, escaping from the daily grind of life and enjoying the company of your mates and having a laugh. And
Yeah.
I can't remember the time, if I'm honest, that I was last incredibly upset at the result of a football match.
No, same here.
The truth is that to me now, following football teams is not really about the result. I'm
No.
more likely to be upset if I watch it at home than I am if I go, because when you're there, it's that sense of belonging you get that actually means far more than the game itself.
I totally agree with that, and that's why I've always tried to sort of explain this to my friends because they think I'm sort of, they don't understand why I'm only angry about a result for about 5 minutes. If it's England or a big tournament, I'm absolutely totally devastated for about 3 weeks. But there's something behind that because I know what winning. I know you're a Scotland fan and you think the same. I know what winning a tournament and the sheer jubilation and impact that it would have in this country. That's why I know people, berate me for liking Gareth Southgate. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the fact that, his tactics or whatever. For me, I was disillusioned with England for years because I didn't feel like they actually cared enough to sort of create an identity within the squad. Players pulling out of tournaments, or squads and stuff because obviously they had injuries and they didn't want to sort of, put their sort of league form at risk against their, international teammate rivals and things like that. And all I ever want as a football supporter is to see a team that's trying. I couldn't care if England or Burnley lost 11 games in a row as long as, like you say, I feel that sense of belonging. I love going to away games, and people think that's weird as well sometimes. I'm obsessed with going to away games, but being with my mates and that, because like you say, it's an escape, a positive form of escape. It's an identity. I'll give you an example. I haven't been out the house for 3 days now because of the weather and stuff, and obviously there's societal problems that we often speak about
Yeah.
within the working environments and stuff. And I also hurt my foot at work on Friday, so I meant to go to the Paddington game on the Saturday, but I was a bit of a wuss and had to put frozen sweet corn on my foot. So Wayne was bantering me about that. But yeah, it's about a release in it, and that's what I sort of love. I loved what you called me the other week when we met up in at the leisure box when you said, "Oh, I'm a spiritual hooligan," and that doesn't mean anything to do with violence
Yeah.
whatsoever because I don't agree with that. That I just love understanding casual culture. Being part of being part of something. It's nothing to do with violence and kicking people's heads, and that's absolutely idiotic behavior. Do you know? But it's like I can't. You get what I mean? It's
Yeah.
togetherness. 100.
Yeah.
Like, I think you were saying, didn't you? You saw me at Middlesbrough going out the stand, and I think that's when I sort of first caught your attention in terms of properly into like getting involved and stuck in with chanting and stuff.
Well, I've known you for many years, mate, and I've seen you at many away games over the years. And obviously, you first came to my attention back with the thing with Danny Ings. That was over a decade ago now, I think, when obviously you and Danny built up that rapport. And look, I think you're right though. That it is about belonging, and it's about feeling like there's a kind of sense of togetherness. And people take that to different extremes. Look, obviously, some people can just enjoy the chants and singing and have a laugh with their mates. Other people take it further, right? And so I kind of I think that in the end you kind of we all know our natural place within that order when it comes to the different extremes to which we take that sense of belonging within football. But the truth is that it's an amazing thing. And if you've never been involved in that sort of thing, if you've never been, in that kind of football culture, like we are, then it's probably quite hard for outsiders to understand it. But once you're in it,
Yeah,
it's one of those things you're in for life.
yeah, 100%. And I sort of would, I always say this to people. I credit the fact that I'm one of the lads down to my mum because
Yeah.
she always, obviously, the elephant in the room is I've got a disability. But the only thing that disables me is society. I get stuck in, I go to the pub with everyone, we go to gigs and concerts and stuff. And that's the only reason why I've been out for 3 days because I've just got my off road wheelchair back. It's just been fixed and stuff. And yeah, it's just about getting stuck in and being involved in all walks of life. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you. Like, even before I met you and followed you on social media and stuff, I always saw that you were very passionate about disability and social causes. Can you explain why that is?
Well, I've always had a passion for talking about issues where I feel like those people don't have much of a voice. And I used to do a lot of work around homelessness. Well, I used to do a lot of work with homeless people, and I still do a bit. Um, I think the disabled community within the UK. I would say that when you look at the sort of minority groups of the UK that constantly get a voice and platform to talk about issues that they feel need addressing in the country, I would say that the disabled community personally feel like they don't get anywhere near the same level of voice that other communities get when it comes to representation in the media or when it comes to a voice in parliament, a voice in the legal system, a voice in different strands of life where actually to make improvements to people's lives, they need a voice. And my experience has taught me, and I've got to know, as you know, I've got to know many, many, many disabled people over the last 5 or 6 years, not just across the UK, but across the whole world. And my experience has taught me that that is a global problem, actually, that the
100%.
disabled need more of a voice. And look, just to finish, ultimately, um, I'd rather dedicate myself to causes, and this feels very relevant right now, given what's happening in the world. But I'd rather dedicate myself to causes where I feel like those people don't get enough of a voice to promote themselves. Um, and so, yeah, I'm very passionate about it. I also, um, not many people know this, but my cousin is disabled.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember you saying.
and, I think actually when it comes to it, the more I think about it, the older I get, and obviously given my own experiences with addiction and recovery and all that, I think that all of us, everyone in society has abilities, but also all of us have things that can disable us at any moment, whether it's mental health problems, whether it's fragilities, vulnerabilities. Everyone in society has them. So we should all be able to relate.
I totally agree because, as you know as well, I sort of I've got to a place over the last 5 years where I was able to manage my mental health
Yeah.
through exercise, and obviously I'm very passionate about addiction as well because unfortunately my stepdad passed away from addiction problems eight years ago now, and I really feel like it's important to continue to talk about mental health and stuff because people would automatically assume, oh, Joe gets sadness or anything like that because of his disability. And I cannot stress enough how much that isn't the case. I definitely think I've got ADHD because you see some of the conversations I have with people. 1 second I'm up here and then the next poof. And then I think that's the case for a lot of people. A lot of people, like you say, have crosses to bear, undiagnosed sort of conditions or whatever, have been diagnosed with Asperger's. But I've started to realise we all have as own, parts of our makeup, and it's what makes us who we are, isn't it? I don't think me and you would have the type of friends that we do if uh, we didn't have this as part of our personality because society, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, expects all disabled people to be friends or sat in a day centre on the PlayStation, and that's just not me at all, is it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And look, I mean, I think that ultimately, you're a credit to the community, but also what I love about what you're doing is you're happy to use your voice to talk about issues that need addressing in the community. Like, for
Yeah,
example, I've seen stuff you've done in the media around the cost of taxis in Burnley and things like that, right? For people, and
yeah,
obviously
man.
to work, you need to take a taxi. They're expensive. The public infrastructure for transport in that area, it's not great in London, by the way, but in your area, it's not great if you're in a wheelchair. And so, ultimately, I think it's very important that people like you, people like me, wherever we can, we use our voice to talk up these things because not many people are using their voice to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And what would you say in terms of if only if you wanted to speak about some of the issues that you've faced, or you don't necessarily have to go into grave detail if you don't feel comfortable,
No,
but
I'm
can
happy.
you just give us a bit of insight into some of the things that you've overcome and what adversity has taught you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm very open and honest about a lot of this stuff publicly, and I have been for many years now. But I got sober from alcohol when I was 23, um, and I've been sober now for nearly 11 years.
I mean,
Alcohol, and I don't touch drugs either. And the truth is that, when I look back, I now know why I drank, and I now know why I got sober because I drank because I was ultimately from a very young age. I definitely had kind of mental health issues from quite a young age. I was very insecure. I lacked self-esteem. And alcohol was a brilliant way to give me a sense of confidence, a sense of self-esteem in my life. And, to get me through social situations from quite a young age. I now look back and realize I was quite actually reliant on alcohol to get myself through quite a lot of things in life from my teenage years onwards. At a certain, some of the best nights I ever had in my life were through alcohol. I mean, I met Diego Maradona when I was drinking, and
wow,
I don't think that would happen if I'd been sober. And still to this day, my only regret of that is I didn't get to spend more time with him, to be honest. But the truth is that you kind of, I don't have any regrets about my drinking, if I'm honest. I could have easily got sober way earlier than I did, um, you know. But in truth, when I look at it now, and the last 11 years have given me a real education in many areas of life through being a member of a fellowship. Um,
wow.
I spend a lot of time communicating with, talking with people in recovery like me, people who are trying to get into recovery, people who are trying to get sober. And the truth is that, I mean, that 11 years of education and having friends who've mentored me through things, of having regular contact with so many people from all walks of life, a bit like football, all walks of life, all different types of people. It's been an amazing part of my development, an amazing part of my journey. And the truth is that, one of the proudest things, one of the things in life I'm most proud of is the fact that, I'm nearly 11 years clean and sober.
Yeah,
And I wouldn't trade that for anything. The truth is that I got sober because I had to. And now I've spent, a significant period of time not drinking. I can only recommend to anyone who is struggling with alcohol or any form of addiction. I can only say that for me, my own experience, getting sober was the best thing I ever did.
that is absolutely class to hear because there's real growth in the struggle, and for me, I don't know if you agree. Addicts are often demonized as the S word gets thrown about if you're addicted to heroin, and I hate the S word, or crackhead, or like I said the other word. But for me, some people with addictions, they're the most beautiful people on the planet because they know what it's like to experience real life shit. Do you get what do you get what I mean? And sort
Yeah.
of they're the most kindest people as well. Can you talk a bit about some of the the experiences within the fellowship or anything else? I know
I
we're
can't
going
I
on a bit.
can't go into that in big detail because obviously
No, you okay?
we have sort of unwritten rules around
That's fine.
communicating about other people. But what I will say is that when I got sober, I genuinely, when I look back, my mindset on life was that I wasn't capable of doing anything wrong. That the only thing that were happening in my life that were wrong were other people doing things that were wrong to me, right? And what I learned through the prism of recovery is that actually all I can do in life is take responsibility for my own behavior, the way I think, the way I deal with obstacles, the way I deal with things in life. And I can't change other people, places, or things. Also, I think through the prism recovery, I've learned to not be a victim. Um, when I was drinking, I always thought of myself as a victim of
Interesting.
someone else's bad intentions or behavior or whatever. And I learned through the prison recovery that actually I'm no victim. And not only that, but I also along the way I've met many people who probably have far more reason to believe they're a victim than I do. But ultimately they don't see themselves as victims either. You know, they're empowered people who have a voice in life, who have real power and influence in the way they speak and the stories they can tell and the humanity they can bring to the world, but they're not seeing themselves as victims. That doesn't mean they're not victims. It means that they don't see themselves as victims. And like my take on it all is that when I was drinking, I saw myself constantly as, somebody who should people should feel sorry for, people should feel pity for. And today I'm very proud of who I am. And I actually, I came from a privileged background. I'm not saying my upbringing was easy because I don't think it was for me. But I also think that, many other people came from far harder situations than I did. And, we're all different, right? But I think as we get older, as I get older anyway, I've just learned to sort of, accept things in life for what they are rather than see them through the prism of what sometimes my head might want to tell me that they are in order to make me feel easier about it. And in truth, through the prism of being sober a long time, and I think this took me a long time in recovery to really get this. In truth, I think that, I live a pretty good life today. And look, I mean, when it comes to football and stuff like that, I think the one area of my life where I'd say that I don't think you'll ever get rid of the addictive side of me is football. Like I think that's the one area of like I don't think you'll ever I'll ever be, I don't think I'll ever be fully spiritual around football. But I think that in many other areas of life, like I'm a far more calm, reasonable person than I ever was when I was drinking. And I've also got a stronger sense of who I am, and I've also got a stronger sense of um, my place in the world and what I want to represent. And yeah, I just think that ultimately the journey of recovery, I think somebody once said to me when I was early in recovery, and I always thought they were talking nonsense, but it turned out every word was pretty much true for me. They said it takes 5 years in recovery to get your marbles back, and then it takes another 5 years to find out what you want to do with them. And I think that that's effectively what's happened with me. It's taken me 10 years really to understand who I am in recovery. It takes time. And if you get rid of substances, if you get rid of, things that, I would now look back now and probably say that drink was like a best mate for many, many years for me. I drank very, very regularly from the age of 13 until I was 23.
Wow.
Once you get rid of that, you have to learn to live without having to cope with those substances. And I got sober as you know at a very young age. I was 23. And in truth, for the first few years of my recovery, that wasn't easy because I was still living in a generation where a lot of people drank a lot all the time, and it was easy to feel like you were left out, or you felt different, or you felt. But now I look at that and think, wow, it was the greatest blessing I ever had, man. I got this young, and now in recovery, I'm meeting more and more young people who are coming into recovery and getting sober at a very young age, and that's incredible in itself.
23 is 1 year younger than myself. And what I've always sort of, thought about you, which is quite incredible to do that at 23, but in general, I always like notice about you, like you said, coming from the background you do and the different social circles you're mixing, you have such a wide range of people that you know, and you're a very socially aware person for me. What would you say you've learnt from all these various different circles that you've been around?
Well, it's very funny you ask. When I was about 25, I met this guy who was I won't name him, but he's a very famous football agent, right? And he said to me one day, he said, Callum, he said, the greatest lesson I can teach you in life is every relationship you have is worth something, right? And what he meant by that, when I actually look at it now, what I think about it, I think what he meant is that you can learn things from anyone. Like, it doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, what background they're from, what job they do. We can all learn things from any individual in the world. That's the truth, right? And in his job, if he represents a player, he's probably talking to guys who run hotels. He's talking to people who do laundry. He's talking to people who, because he's helping to manage a player, like in players, and he probably has to deal with CEOs of football clubs 1 minute, and then he's dealing with, guys who clean, clean hotel rooms. I don't know. Like, he's probably dealing with a wide range of people all the time, right? In my life, if I'm honest, I love having a wide range of relationships with lots of people from lots of different places, lots of different backgrounds, and all over the world. It's something I've actually definitely inherited from my father, who's also very good at that and a very good networker. And I think I'm quite a good networker as well. But the truth is that I love to learn and speak to people from lots of different places around the world, because it's how I learn about the world. I don't, if I only talk to 10 people in North London, how am I ever going to learn how the world works, right? If I was on the phone yesterday to someone in Venezuela. I've been on the phone today to someone in Colombia. Um, you know, I talk to people from all sorts of backgrounds all over the world, and I think every single one of them can teach me something about life or help me in some way. And I think that's a great asset actually to have in life, is the ability to talk to people from lots of different backgrounds. And actually, that's one of the things I'd really credit my parents with, is by sending us to a state school. And we went to a state school in North London. When I was about 27, a really good mate of mine called me Chameleon Campbell. That's what he used to call me, Chameleon, because he used to say that I could engineer myself into any situation with any group of people, and I could make it look like I was at home with any of them. I could be with rich bankers in the city talking about, all their crap 1 minute, and then I'll be down in my local pub the next minute talking to people in a completely different way about something, the completely opposite end of the spectrum. And the truth is that I think in life that's a good asset to have, is if you're able to communicate and deal with people from all sort of layers of society, across all types of people. And yeah, I've always believed, if I'm honest, that you can learn things from anyone. I can learn things from the homeless guy at the end of my road. I can also learn things from, bankers in the city. There's things that you can learn from um, anyone, and you can learn from people's stories, but you can also learn from the way they deal with life and the way they deal with people. And yeah, that was probably a long ramble, but the truth is that your point about having relationships with lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds, I think that's a great asset to have. And in truth, at football, even, I'm probably one of the few people at Burnley who probably knows most people. Like, when it comes to different groups of people who hang out with each other, I'm one of the people who probably knows most of those different groups. And that's a skill to have in my view, being able to bring people together and actually, get to learn about lots of different people, including you, Joe. Learn about how people operate and how they deal with life on a daily basis and what they believe in, etc. I think all of this stuff, the more people you know and the more people you learn from, the more it contributes to your own development and growth.
I totally agree, and that's what this podcast is about. To be honest with you, Callum, as you know, I don't even want to ever be sort of classed as, you know, I I'm still working out what I want to do in this game. Half of the reason why I'm, working in the media, or like still pushing on with the podcast, is to build the relationships. It's never about to get a story or, to get a headline, and that's definitely something that I can't ever see myself doing something that's grotty within the industry. Like, for example, that voice dictation match report that I did for the Times in August. That could have been for the Sun newspaper, but I turned it down straight away and said, no, I'm not doing that, because it's all about doing what's right for me. And if that doesn't necessarily mean getting to the top or whatever, then so be it. That's why I believe I'm able to build these relationships like yourself, because I'm real. Say, for example, if somebody didn't want to do an interview, or if you didn't want a certain part of this interview in the interview, I wouldn't put it in. Or apparently, our tutors tell us when we was at uni that you're not even meant to tell the guests what questions you're going to ask, and I'm like, absolutely not. I'm going to let them know what we're going to speak about, because that's what puts me off for the media, because a lot of people are nervous to speak about things, even when you're not even saying anything wrong. Cancel culture is rife, and please don't think I mean anything to do with any form of discrimination whatsoever. I just feel like people are nervous, even when you're saying you like a cup of tea over a cup of coffee. So, like you say, it's about building those relationships, and hopefully we've gone through that today, and I've really enjoyed this discussion. This is what it's about, finding out what people are about, and hopefully the viewers like what they've heard from themselves. Have you got any final parting messages for anyone listening?
Yeah, I would just say to what you just said, actually, that two things very quickly. The first I would say is that ultimately, when you're presenting questions to people, to your point about your tutors, I often think with these things that actually it's really about making sure people are comfortable before they go on air about what they're going
Yeah,
to talk about. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to give them every question, worded question in advance, but it might just mean you write a list of topics you want to talk about so that they have a sense of, what the conversation is going to go into. And so they can tell you before you go on air, I'm not very comfortable talking about that or that, right? And that then just gives you the understanding of what areas you shouldn't go into before you record. As a sort of closing message, if there was one, I mean, firstly, look, I'm honoured that you asked me to come on, Joe. I've known you for a number of years through football. You're a good man. And look, I think clubs like Burnley, I have to say that, our fan base, like many fan bases, we get a bad rep from people. People talk about how this fan base is full of X and Y and Z, but actually, like you're a prime example of where we show ourselves to be a family. Like everybody tries to treat you, from what I'm aware and from what I've seen, everybody tries to treat you with full respect, with full admiration, and we all love seeing you at games. Obviously on the away games and stuff. When I see you, I always say hello. We always have a chat, and I think that ultimately, like, I guess my message is that I really wish you the best of luck with this podcast. I think you're doing great stuff, and I'm sure along the way I can find other people who could come on here and do, recorded podcasts with you. It could be pretty cool for this. Radical people that you'd probably like listening to. And ultimately, look, I have the greatest respect for you and Wayne, by the way. He was a great guy.
big
Um,
respect, Wayne.
Wayne won't like the shout out, by the way, but anyway, we'll give him that, even though he probably won't be very happy about that. And the truth is that I've got great respect and admiration for you all, and yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me on, and keep doing what you're doing.
Nice one, mate. And I've just got a final sort of parting message that just popped up into my head. I know you're a Scotland fan, and I'm going to the Euros watching England. Will I be seeing you at the European Championships in Germany in the summer?
Absolutely, mate. My cousins in Paisley have got it's pretty cool actually. We've basically rented a chalet near Frankfurt for the whole tournament. I haven't rented it. My cousin's husband has basically organised it all, but they've basically rented this big space near Frankfurt for the whole thing, 27 bedrooms, and they're all paying for it put together. But they basically said to me, look, like if you're coming out, come stay with us. We're going to travel to Stuttgart. We're going to travel to Munich, and we're going to travel to Cologne from the chalet for every game. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to go with my cousins from Paisley, and hopefully, hopefully the Scotland players will do us proud. I'm sure they will. Actually, I think they've, I think that we've got the best team we've had for over 20 years, and I think that ultimately, I actually fancy us in this group. I think with Hungary and Switzerland, I think we've got a real shot of getting through. I don't think Germany are anywhere near as good as they were. I'm not scared of playing the Germans in the first game. I think we'll give them a game. And ultimately, I think they'll do us proud. And for me, just to finish, I remember when I was 8 or 9, I remember watching the World Cup in 1998 and Morocco beat us 3-0. And I remember crying on my mum and dad's sofa. And, obviously I saw us at the Euros in 2021, where I managed to get a ticket at Wembley for the game at Wembley, the 0-0 draw of England. But ultimately, for me, like the last Euros is the only tournament I've seen Scotland at since 1998, and so to be able to travel to Germany and go to the tournament with hundreds of thousands of people following the team, who will be following the team, just like England will take hundreds of thousands as well, will be a real honour and a pleasure and a great memory, because there have been times in my teenage years and my early 20s and mid 20s where I really thought that I might never see it again.
100%. And that's a great way to sort of sign off. And hopefully, England and Scotland meet at the tournament. But as a final sign off, thank you for coming on again, Callum, and putting up with my many musings. And I'll speak to you off recording once I stop in a second, mate. But as a sign off, up the Clarets.
Top man, Joe. Thank you.
1 second.